Hello, and welcome to the workshop on designing a successful academic journal. My name is Alisha Lavender, and I'm one of the instructional assistants in the Writing Center here at FSW. So today we're going to focus primarily on the journals assigned in the Cornerstone course here at FSW, but the advice is applicable to any class that you might be writing a journal for. The most important thing to understand is what an academic journal is. It's meant to be a tool to help with your learning. It's not simply a description of something, but rather a reflection on an analysis of your thoughts, perceptions, and feelings about that thing. Alright, so now that we know what an academic journal is, it's important to talk about a couple of things that an academic journal isn't. So first of all, an academic journal is not a list of tasks. We can see here that someone needs to go to the store and buy shoes, get cookies at the bakery, and make a dentist appointment. But there's nothing to be learned from that. There's no reflection there. So that is not a good example of an academic journal. In the same way, a diary is not an academic journal. The paragraph that we have here says, "I had a wonderful time on my date with Roger last night. We went to the movies in Fort Myers, and then we went out for a pizza. I had plain cheese, and then we went to his brother's house and played Scrabble with his family. I got home at midnight." This is a description of an event, yes, but there's no analysis there, there's no reflection. And so it's not a good example of an academic journal. Okay, so when an academic journal asks for information about an experience, you do want to name that experience and share your thoughts and feelings about it, but you also want to make sure that you're analyzing it. You're including context from your class, and you're providing details that answer the questions who, what, where, when, how, and why. And those last two questions, the how and the why, are really the most important. Alright, so we'll talk briefly about the rubric that's used for the critical thinking journals in Cornerstone. The criteria on that rubric are clarity, relevance, significance, and logic, and the range you can be scored on is exemplary, accomplished, developing, or beginning. And so logic and clarity relate to how your paper is written, how it's organized, if you're using academic language, good grammar, all of that. And then the relevance and significance go back to those questions we just talked about, the how and the why. So you want to make sure that you're explaining what's so important about a topic or an event. Okay, so some tips for success with the Cornerstone academic journals. Make sure you always read the professor's instructions and pay attention to the prompt, which are questions within the instructions. You can even write your paragraphs in the same order as the prompts. That way you know for sure that your essay is organized logically and that you're not missing anything. It's also a good idea to choose your source, so the quote that you're using from the college success textbook early on. That way you can make sure it fits into your journal well and supports your original ideas. There's nothing worse than having a paper that's pretty much completely finished and then having to frantically go dig through the textbook to try to find a quote that fits and shoehorn it into something that's already completed. As always, you want to make sure you're using academic grammar skills and that you've used spell check and grammar check in Microsoft Word or Grammarly, wherever you like to use them. And finally, it's always a good idea to read a paper out loud before turning it in. Hearing the words will help you to catch errors that you might not have otherwise noticed. Okay, so remember that one of the tips for success we just looked at was to write your answers in the same order as the questions or prompts in the directions. You can also use the questions in your answers. So if you've got something like, how do you plan to pay college tuition? You can say, I plan to pay my college tuition by filing for financial aid and getting a part-time job. You can see that the underlined words there are the same in both the question and the answer. Same thing with, is it better for you to live on campus? It is better for me to live on campus because I will be close to student resources and will have a better chance of getting to class on time. And then how can you improve your study skills? I can improve my study skills by attending workshops and finding quiet areas to study. So not only will this help you make sure that you're answering everything that is asked of you, but it will also keep you on track and prevent you from going off on tangents. Okay, so now we'll look at some examples of how you can apply that method to whole paragraphs. The prompt for the first Cornerstone journal is, reflect and analyze why you are attending college. What motivated you to enroll? What goals do you hope to achieve? Alright, so the first part of that prompt is reflect and analyze why you're attending college. So this person has written, I was 26 years old with 4 children and a failing marriage when I decided to begin college. I was working long hours as a waitress to help support my household and realized I would need to find a career that would provide both more income and more time to be with my children. I observed that psychology offered many levels of jobs. College was the key to that career. So take a second to reflect on things that the author is doing well in this paragraph, and then we'll meet up on the next slide to talk about some of those things. This author has given us both a specific picture of where they were before college, 26 years old with 4 children and a failing marriage, and also where they want to go after college. Psychology has many levels of jobs, and they want one of those jobs. All right, so the next part of that prompt is what motivated you to enroll. This author has written, I chose Florida Southwestern State College because it offered flexibility and was the least expensive. My children were the strongest motivators as I began this project. They came to realize that by working together, we would have the best chance of building a new and better lifestyle. Again, take a second to think about what's being done well, and we'll talk about it on the next slide. All right, so this author has given us both the reasons for choosing FSW specifically, flexibility and price point, and then said my children were the strongest motivators. So we've got that word motivated in the prompt, and then motivators showing up in our answer. And then finally, they go back to that idea of a new and better lifestyle that we saw in the previous paragraph. All right, so the last part of that prompt is what goals do you hope to achieve? This author has written, my goal is to complete my AA degree at FSW in 2 years by combining traditional and online classes while maintaining a 3.0 GPA or better. I will then transfer to FGCU and earn a BS in psychology. Then I will be able to work in the field at an entry-level job while I pursue an MS and ultimately earn a PhD. So once more, you can take a second to think, and then on the next slide, we'll talk about things that are being done well. Okay, so this author has given us a couple of different goals. They talk about what they want at FSW, what they want at FGCU, and then what they ultimately want. So it's great if you can do that and kind of look to the future. It's also okay if for now you just have FSW goals. Just make sure that they're specific and that you talk about them in a logical order. So now that we've talked about how to use the prompt in your answer, we're going to look at how to integrate a quote smoothly into your journal. In the Writing Center, we like to talk about the ICE method, which stands for Introduce, Cite, and Explain. You want to make sure you're setting the reader up to understand the info you're giving them, that you cite it correctly, and then you explain why it's important in this particular journal. And we'll look at some examples of how to do that on the next few slides. In our example of an iced quote, it says, in the Types of Students section of College Success, the author points out that many returning students are commuter students too and may come on campus only for classes. This is a situation that I find myself in as I first attended college many years ago and am now returning to finish my degree. It is comforting to know that I am in good company. Here we've color-coded the ICE method. So in the blue Introduce section, the author is letting us know that a quote from College Success is coming. They've got the author's last name there, Bruce, in green. That's the citation, and we'll talk more about those in a second. And then the pink Explain section is probably the most important. It's where the author is explaining how this quote is relevant to them and their journal. The citation style that you'll be using for your Cornerstone journals is MLA. And there are 2 aspects to MLA. There are in-text citations, like the green citation we just looked at, which are select pieces of information that appear in the body of your essay when you mention information from a source. You'll also have a works cited page, which will contain full bibliographical information for that source, and you want to make sure you always have both. Different types of sources will require different in-text citations and different entries on the works cited page. To find guides for all different types of sources, you can look at the MLA Handbook, the Little Seagull Handbook, Purdue University's Online Writing Lab, or you can ask the Writing Center, send us an email, and ask for our MLA guide. Here is a sample in-text citation from the College Success textbook. So in quotation marks, we have the words from the source, which are, tutoring and writing centers are established for all students, and seeking help from them is expected and to your advantage. Such services are covered by your tuition dollars, and they can richly enhance performance in any area of your studies. Then we've got the end of the quotation marks, and in parentheses before the period, we have Bruce, which is the author's last name. And we have a sample works cited entry to go with the in-text citation. So here we start with Bruce, the author's last name, and then we have a period and her first name, Linda. We have the title of the chapter in quotation marks, which is College Overview. We have College Success, the book title in italics, Lumen Learning is the publisher, and then we have the URL for this particular chapter. The example we just looked at followed MLA's guide for citing a website. With the College Success textbook, you'll want to keep in mind that there are several different authors, so you'll need to check each chapter to make sure you're citing it correctly. We'll look at how to do that on the next few slides. If you scroll to the bottom of any chapter or section in College Success, you'll see a button that says Licenses and Attributions. This will open an expanded menu, and you'll see the phrase Authored By in bold. Whatever name follows that phrase is the one you'll want to use for your author in your citations. So as our last activity, we're going to look at 3 paragraphs. As we read these, keep these questions in mind. What did the writer do well? How could the writer improve? And what could be added to improve this paragraph? The prompt is going to be the same for all of these, and it's here at the top. Write 1 paragraph giving advice to a new student about how to take notes and prepare for tests as a college student. Include 1 citation. And then for this first example, the author has written, if you are going to attend college, it may require taking several notes and studying to prepare for tests. Some students have a hard time doing so. As they say, all you need is a little direction and you will be able to succeed. So think about those 3 questions, and then on the next slide we'll talk about the answers. One obvious and glaring mistake here is that the prompt asked for a citation and this author didn't give one. This is also very general and vague advice. It says that you might have to take notes and you might have to study, but doesn't give you any direction on how to do that. So one thing that you always want to remember is you want to be specific and focused in your journals and give concrete answers. So with that same prompt, this next author has written, develop notes into study guides. From my personal experience, taking notes enables you to utilize that information when you study. It is very simple to take notes. Keep your attention on the reason that you are studying for. Studying and taking notes are incorporated with each other because you must remember that to study, you need all the information you can get. Use highlighters, sticky notes, and other office supplies to organize yourself. So once again, take a second to think about our 3 questions and then meet me on the next slide. This author does have a quote, develop notes into study guides, but they haven't iced it. They haven't cited it at all. We have no idea where it comes from or how it relates to what they're saying, especially since they don't talk about study guides. Just like the previous paragraph, a lot of it is very general. They say things like it's very simple to take notes and keep your attention on the reason you're studying for. Where this paragraph starts to get good is at the end, where they talk about using highlighters, sticky notes, and other office supplies to organize yourself. That's the beginnings of a concrete tip that they could have expanded on to make this paragraph much better. Our last paragraph uses the same prompt again, and this author says, when you study, it is essential to put time aside to study in a designated area with no disturbance. If you are studying for a long period of time, taking 15-minute breaks in 15-minute intervals helps to refresh your brain. Some people do not have as much time to study as others. Every minute counts. The most important thing to remember about studying and taking notes is that it is all about time and effort. Our textbook suggests try simple things to break down large tasks, such as setting aside an hour or so each day to work on them during the weeks leading up to the deadline. If you put in your all, you are bound to reach for the stars. Once more, think about our questions and then meet me on the next slide. We're finally getting somewhere specific. This author does a really great job with the specific tip about taking 15-minute breaks in 15-minute intervals. They're also using a quote from the textbook to support what they're saying about every minute counting. The quote gives specific examples of how to make every minute count. One thing that they could do a little bit better is they're not icing their quote properly. They need to make sure they at least have the author's last name for the citation. And then they end on a little bit of a cliche. It would be a good idea if they could try to come up with a more original closing sentence. That brings us to the end of our academic journaling workshop. I hope it's been helpful. If you'd like more help or you'd like to talk about a specific assignment, the FSW Writing Center is here for you. We have 2 options available: drop-in tutoring via Zoom with no appointment needed, or a drop-off essay review service via email. For semester-specific hours and the links to access each option, please visit fsw.edu/academic support. That link can be found down in the description. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a great day.